Welcome in to another episode of Clearing the Air with Kevin Calere. I am your host, Kevin Calere, and this is the best in sports talk content. So you make sure you treat it as such. Hit the subscribe buttons everywhere you get this podcast, whether it's digital, whether it's video, YouTube, all that good stuff. Make sure you get it. Hit the subscribe, hit the bells, like all that good stuff. We're going to get right into it. We got a lot to talk about for episode, I guess this is 3. I will apologize for the episode earlier in the week. I actually recorded an episode, had a little technical difficulty. There was no audio, so it's gone. So you'll just have to imagine what I possibly had for you guys. But it is that time of the week where I have a guest join me. So without further ado, I will bring on a good friend of mine, Mr. Arthur Freeman. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing great, Kev. How are you?
You know, man, I can't complain. I think this is the first time I'm seeing you since the last time I saw you, which was, I want to say, a trip to Asheville. For those who don't know, Asheville's what, 4.5 hours away from the area we live. We went for a good dear friend of mine, your cousin's birthday. He turned 28, 26, 28, something like that.
One of them, yeah.
And we vowed never to go anywhere with him again.
Oh yeah, he burned that bridge. We love you, B, but you can't be in charge of the planning for anything involving myself.
This is the second, which that made the second weekend trip gone disaster. And yeah, that was it. So, and the next time I'll see you will be in a couple months for that very same person's wedding. So it's funny how that works. But yeah, man, since I have last saw you, since I've last talked to you, you have gotten engaged. You have moved apartments. I had talked to you when you first started your podcast, but now your podcast is, I'm assuming, still in full swing.
Oh yeah.
You just said you got a new mic, so you got a lot going on here. Yeah, man, like you just you're really grinding out here.
Dude, I mean, that's the thing, right? Like, it's all about the work, and like I hate how cliche that sounds. It sounds like it belongs on like a Nike t-shirt or something, but like it really is, a labor of love. I use that term a lot when I talk about the podcast because there's a lot of labor, like it's a lot of work, and you know it firsthand. But I'm with a really great crew. We do the show Victory Lane Vibes. We talk about all things racing. I think we are the best all black racing podcast in my very unbiased opinion. And, we're a good time. And I actually am very fortunate. I just came back on Sunday. I was at the race in Richmond. We applied, got media credentials. So we were down there in Victory Lane. We were on pit road. We were in the press box. We were in the media center. VLV is out here trying to grow. And, we're just folks that love racing, and, we love to talk about it. And, we've gotten a lot of love from certain people in the industry. So, the sky's the limit for us. And, we're just trying to grow and get better. I'm doing projects now that I never thought I'd do. Like, I'm up here now editing episodes, and I'm like, I didn't know how to do this. Like, I didn't sign up for this. Like, I don't know how CapCut works, but like, you figure it out, right? And you just keep going. So it's a labor of love. And I'm really grateful for the team that I'm with. We all just kind of found each other, and it's been really fun.
It's so interesting that you mentioned a couple things. You talked about a labor of love. I remember when you were getting into it and you had asked me like any sort of tip, whatever that I could possibly give. And I just remember thinking about the work and like, if you're willing to do the work, because people think, all right, well, we can just cut on a mic and pod. And like, while granted, yes, in theory, like at its very, very base, at its core, that is correct. That is exactly what you're doing, is you're opening the computer, finding a way to record into something with your microphone and podcasting. But like, you obviously, like we are people, and I know you're this way as well, who want to do stuff the right way and do it well. So it's not just put on the mic and kind of like don't prepare and so on and so forth. That's interesting, man, about the press credentials, because that's not something that a lot of people think that they can get. Like, people just think that the press, you have to work for ESPN or for the radio or TV to do that
Mhm.
stuff.
Right.
And then they think you have to be some whiz to edit videos, but just like you, man, it's CapCut, or OBS. There's a lot of post-production stuff. So when you record a podcast at 8:30 at night and you finish, it's midnight before you go to sleep. And the only reason you do something like that, which you're not getting paid for, is because you love it. So man, I really love to hear that from the last time when we first spoke about it, the fact that you guys are really taking it serious. And then of course, the best part of all of it is it's all black, but it's NASCAR, right? And
Right,
so, of
right.
course, the first question I have to ask you, because I wasn't going to start with this, but since this is just a perfect transition getting into NASCAR, given that I haven't thought a thing about NASCAR, but the very last time I had you on a podcast, the
I was
very
gonna
first question
say.
I asked you, which is going to be the first question I ask you every time with NASCAR, is how's the racism?
Well, there's no single metric for it, but I'd like to think that racism is down, like we went to the race and you know, I can only comment off the people that I'm around and like the things that I see, and we have friends who go to a lot of races. And like I think it's gotten a lot better. I feel like the audience that they're trying to cultivate is much more of an inclusive audience. It's much more family friendly. It's not just the stereotypical air quotes redneck, beer drinker that people often associate with NASCAR. Now, if you want to be a redneck and drink beer and go to races, that's fine, but you just can't be a bigot in addition to it, right? Like like you can be all of those things, and I think I kind of feel bad because I knew people in college. This is a side tangent, but I knew people in college that were definitely rednecks. They had the deep Southern accent. They went hunting. They shot squirrel and ate it for dinner and all that. And we were best friends. Like those you could be all of those things and not racist. So I kind of hate how like they've kind of taken those things because I know a lot of people, and again, this is only firsthand account, but like they're great people. They invited me to go out with them and go four-wheeling with them and all that stuff, and they have a good time. And then they can go and be in the same room as a black person, not break out in hives, like those things are nice to see. But I think they've gotten a lot better in terms of, like I said, being more inclusive. Obviously, I think the last time we spoke on the pod, the big thing was the ban of the Confederate flag within the track, within the parking lots. The last race I went to last year, of course, like I can't lie and not tell you that I did see a big truck selling, Trump merchandise and Blue Lives Matter flags and like rebel flags. Like those people still exist, and like I'd be lying to you if I said they didn't exist, right? Like, I'm not going to sit here and act like everything's been solved. And like, this is the one place in the world that racism doesn't exist. It's the 3.5 hours is a NASCAR race. Like, I'm not going to go that far, but they have made a lot of really great strides. And, I felt very comfortable at all the races I've been to recently. The group that I talk to, a lot of them go to multiple races a year, all across the Southeast, as many as they can. They'll go sometimes by themselves. They feel comfortable. So I would say they're definitely trending in the right direction. I think there's still work that needs to be done, but you know, I appreciate the effort that's been put in. And you can see, minority track owners now. You see more minorities getting opportunities in terms of media. You can definitely see that. They have a program that's called Drive to Diversity, which they find minority drivers that are young, 15, 17, and they will help train them and try to help them get opportunities to work in racing. So you might be a driver, you might be in the shop, you might be on a pit crew. There's no guarantee, right? You're going to get a ride in a seat at the top level, but they give those drivers opportunities, and it's paid off for NASCAR. Kyle Larson is a champion. He came through that program. Bubba Wallace came through that program. Raj Caruth just won a race a few weeks ago. He's black. He's 20. He's still in college. Like his whole career is ahead of him. He's a problem, like in the best possible way. Like he's going to be a problem. He came through that program. On our show, we've interviewed a couple folks that have come through it. And, you don't really see other leagues doing that sort of program, at least that I know of. So I think the effort is there. It seems like the money they're putting behind it is out there. It's one of those things you have to keep cultivating it until all the fruit comes to bear. But I think they're definitely making the right steps.
It's so interesting because right, the very when we talked, and this is how we're dating ourselves here as far as how long it was ago. But yeah,
Yep.
they banned the Confederate flag. It was a big uproar. Then you had like I want to say like Michael Jordan, like wasn't Bubba Wallace driving the Michael Jordan car or something like
Hmm.
that? Is he even
Yeah.
still involved? Like you can see just how disconnected I've been from NASCAR. And then
Yeah.
uh you mentioned like people that'll go by themselves. Like I promise you right now, me being as black as I can possibly be will not be showing up to a NASCAR race by myself, but I do want to experience one because just from the way people talk about it, it is a thrill in a different kind of way. I think you're so far from the action at a football game and at a basketball game if you're not like courtside.
Yeah.
And it's so quiet and there's so many pauses, right, for timeouts and um which I guess there's some pauses too in NASCAR, but it doesn't feel like a pause. It's loud, it's outside. I guess, well, I assume most of them are outside and like people are cheering and there's 30 people and there's a crash and this, that, and the third. So it definitely seems like something that would be exhilarating. Like I said, going by myself is not an option, but hey,
Well, look.
I'm glad to see that. I'm glad to hear NASCAR is getting blacker because it needed some diversity.
Yeah, I mean, I think, if you looked at even just 2000, not that long ago, if you looked at the roster of the top series, and not just again the drivers, but the pit crews, the people that work on the cars, the media personalities, that percentage that were just white men, like that was huge. And like that number has definitely changed. Like I said, you see more women now getting involved in the racing. We had a race to start the season in Daytona. I think we had 3 women involved in it. And I think that's a high for a single NASCAR race. So like that's growing a lot too. But yeah, I would say one, if anyone is interested, you should absolutely go to a race. NASCAR racing, I would say, and I've been to, all the big leagues, sports in attendance. It is the one sport that is the most different in person versus on TV. Like if you go to a hockey game, it's way faster in person than on TV. You're like, these boys are buzzing around the ice, right? In basketball, I feel like the athleticism is more impressive, seeing what they can do on a court. But with NASCAR, it is such a different beast. Like I cannot put into words, I cannot undersell how different it is. When they fire up, I mean, it is the loudest thing I've ever heard in my life. Like you have to have ear protection or you will go deaf. Like it's absolutely mandatory. And it is so fast. I mean, the sights, the smells, the rubber, the gas, like all of those things. Like, if you have any interest in like going fast or like seeing things go fast, like it is a different world. Even at the smaller tracks, they're still doing 120. Imagine going 120 in a half-mile circle for 500 laps for 3.5 hours. Like it's a real test of endurance, not just of the machine, but of you as the human, because those cars get to be 150 degrees and you can sweat out 10 pounds in a race easy. Like they don't have AC in the cars, right? Like everything's about weight reduction. So
Mm.
um it's really just an impressive. I have so much respect for the drivers, and we talk about it on the show a lot, but like it's so hard mentally, physically on them. It's so taxing. So I have such a respect for them. But yeah, like it's such a unique experience that I really wish more people could experience. Like that's what I would tell someone. Like, don't watch it on TV first if you can. Like if you have the means, if the schedule lines up to it, I'd say go to one in person first, just because it's that nice. Like it's that amazing. And I will say also, just because of the size of the venues, the tracks, that it's really hard to have a bad seat at a race. If you're down low, it's great. If you're up high, it's great. If you're somewhere in the middle, they're all staggered. So, I feel like, we've been to basketball games and like if you're in the nosebleeds, like you can't see anything. Like you're watching ants run around basically. But at a NASCAR race, like there's really no bad seats, and it is such a just a thrilling experience like every week. There's storylines that carry out. Um, the fact that you've got every driver on the court on the track at the same time is something that I think is a bit unique, right? Like you go to a basketball game, you watch two teams, right? And like that's fine. And this isn't a knock on other sports because I love team sports as well. Like I love my football, I love my basketball. Like, we talk about those sports all the time. But when you go to a NASCAR race, it's 36 teams and they're all gunning for it. And there's a lot more variability in terms of who could win. Now you've got some drivers that might be favorites versus others. They may have better equipment versus others, but you really don't know until late what happens. At the race we were just at, they raced for about 3.5 hours, 300, let's say 98 laps, 2 laps to go. The guy in front is ahead. He's going to win. Like he's at the best car all day, right? As long as he finishes the next 30 seconds of driving, he'll win the race. Something happens. They have a caution. They have to pit, change tires. He loses the lead, loses the race. Now that's how quickly you can just have it snatched away from you. And so if you're a fan of the guy who won, like that's how quickly you can go from I'm in third place with 30 seconds to go. Like I have zero shot. And all of a sudden, boom, you're right back in it. So, and like every race, of course, isn't that great, but it's just more unpredictable, I would say, than team sports. Like every week you go into it, you have no idea what's going to happen. And I could wax poetically about it for hours. I do on the podcast, but like it's just such a fun experience. Just the uniqueness of it, and there's other forms of racing and I respect what they do, but for me, like NASCAR is what I grew up on as a kid with my grandfather. Like it's all I've loved. That was my first love of motorsports was NASCAR. So to me, there's nothing better than it.
I'm gonna tell you something. You need to find a way to get yourself some paid promotion because you just sold that to me. I tell you, I'll tell you what, that was something that made me like, oh man, that sounds so exciting. One of the things about like going to live events versus watching them on TV, I don't know if it's this way with NASCAR, and I want and remind me to go back to when you mentioned you're getting press credentials and all that stuff. But like going to a live basketball game, I remember going watching the Cavs. This is when LeBron was in Cleveland and on his second stint, and they were playing like the Wizards. I was living in Richmond, DC was a couple hours away. And I just remember watching the game and I didn't realize how much I value or how much I rely on commentary and like the screen to tell me
The
what's going
tracker,
on.
yeah,
So
everything.
all
Yep.
of a sudden, I look up, okay, Cleveland won. LeBron had 22, 12, and 10, and Kevin Love had 35 points. And I was like, wait, when? Like I was just watching the game, had no clue that the Cleveland Cavaliers were up 20. Kevin Love had
Right.
35 points. He was on a heater. LeBron had a triple-double. Kyrie didn't play that night. And like I had no clue whatsoever. Is it the same like that with NASCAR, or are you a little bit more in tune what's going on?
So I think you're a bit more in tune because I feel like you have a better sense, like, and of course, like the more you watch it, the more you learn about it. I'm not going to say like someone who comes in is going to necessarily understand every strategic move, but you can come in and watch a race and figure out, okay, these guys are pitting, they're going to have fresher tires, they're about to be faster than everybody else. Well, someone else might say, I might try to wait and pit and be faster than you later on in the race, right? Like those kind of strategy moves. But honestly, I feel like if I see one car is ahead of another by 10 car lengths and 5 laps later they're side by side, well, I can watch that guy run him down. And now it's a case where you've caught him, but can you pass him? Right? Those are two different things. And I think they're two different skills just because of the way the cars work. Like they're so sensitive. The air around the cars changes when they get close to each other, right? Like these are literally closer to rocket ships and fighter jets and anything. Like they're so affected by the air and the wind around them. But if I watch him catch him, well, now can he pass him? Right? Can he get the lead? Is he trying to stretch it on fuel? Like there's so many different things. We saw a race a few weeks ago where they had teammates and one guy was in second place and they were coming up on his teammate who was, a lap down. He had a bad race. Is he going to block for him? Right? Is he going to be a pick to try to help his teammate catch up? Like all of these like little nuances to the race can happen. And like you never plan it, right? Like they didn't sit up there on a Tuesday before the race on the weekend and say, okay, well, we're going to make sure that we pick for you, with 5 laps to go. But I feel like you can go in and you can appreciate the experience of the race for what it is if you've gone in completely cold. All the tracks have a giant pylon that has all the numbers and the running order for drivers, and they all have giant big screens as well. So you can keep track of like if there's a certain driver you want to root for, you can find out where they're racing at any given moment. But I think the TV does help, but it really just provides context. If I had to trade in watching it just on TV and having the announcers versus watching in person, I take in person 36 races a year. Like it's that much better. And even if you do go, this is another thing that's unique about NASCAR is that you can go and rent ahead of time headsets, these big headsets like we have on, and you can go and listen to the radio and you can get the TV broadcast, you can get the radio broadcast, you can listen to the team communications. So I can go and rent a headset for $20 and go to the track and I can listen to Bubba Wallace's team radio. Like it's the exact team radio. And they'll say, okay, we're going to pit in 2 laps. And you watch in 2 laps, he'll come around, he'll pit because it's the exact team radio. That's just something that's unique about NASCAR. They offer that, the big 4 in terms of team sports, like they don't offer that. Like I can't listen to, Patrick Mahomes in the huddle, get a call, like that's just never going to happen. But because of the nature of NASCAR, that's something you can do as well. Like if you just want to have a fuller experience. But yeah, I think you could go and absolutely have a good time. Just bring some earplugs. That's my one rule. Like bring the best earplugs you got. Maybe bring 2 because it's the loudest thing you will ever hear. And it hurts. You take those earphones out, it hurts your ears. It's just painful. That's how loud it is.
Damn. Well, yeah, I'm not trying to go deaf, but that sounds
Yeah.
that sounds really cool. And I know that at one point you were planning on going to one, and again, this was right after the trip to Asheville. Like I said, like the trip that went wrong. And I don't know, like I don't know what happened. I wasn't able to go or whatever. But yeah, that's definitely something that interests me. The last thing before we move, since we're still in like the NASCAR space, you mentioned you guys like now you guys can, or well, at least you applied for some press credentials in your own press row, and you're doing this, that, and the third. Does that change the experience for you? Just given the fact that now you don't really get to go as a fan, it's almost like you're kind of going for work. And I understand you're, you love this podcast and stuff, and you love this NASCAR stuff. So therefore, it's a match made in heaven. But
Right.
it's like, okay, I'm here now. I got to make sure that I hit X, Y, and Z, whether it's I need to make sure I get a certain amount of interviews or I need to make sure that I'm getting I don't really know how the press works with NASCAR, but making sure I
Mhm.
get some questions out there, getting pictures or just getting that kind of access. Because when we talked about what people don't understand when it comes to podding, it's just it it is work. And so you don't get to just, oh yeah, I sat in the press box, but I didn't do nothing because then you didn't get anything out of that. And then
Right.
what were the point of the credentials? You could have just, other than maybe getting into the job, the place for free and maybe getting a parking pass. Otherwise, like, what are you doing?
Right. Yeah, I would say, the only part that I didn't like about it, and this is just a personal thing, is I'm not good at networking. Like I fully admit that for me, even when I was in college, that was the thing I hated most, like coming out of college, trying to grow a career in the professional world was networking. That's the only thing that I don't like about it, but I recognize that it's something that's necessary. Like you have to go up and introduce yourself to strangers and give out business cards and, try to build some relationships or at least make sure that they know you're there and are memorable because, the same people that we in like the NASCAR will know as like the main media figures, well, they're having lunch at the table next to us or at the table with us. So on the one hand, it's like you can't be starstruck. Like my partner that was with me, like he was like, "Holy shit! Like this is so." Oh, sorry, I don't know if I can cuss on here, but
You're
uh,
good. You're good.
okay. But he was like, "Oh shit! Like this is so and so right here." And it's like, yeah, but we have to be cool about it. Like we have to keep our act together. Like we can't be like, "Oh my god, it's so great to meet you," right? Like you,
Yep.
because like
Yep.
as far as he knows, like we're peers, and yes, we are peers, but this is our first race, this press credential. This is probably his 600th, right? So like
Yeah.
it's no big deal for him. So that was the only hard part I would say. Everyone that we did meet and interact with was very nice. Like there wasn't anyone that was like really stuck up or like, tried to big league us or anything like that. A lot of people recognize like, okay, you're someone new. Like I don't I travel to every race in this circle. I haven't seen you before, so I know you're new, right? And so like a lot of people recognize like, hey, you're trying to get your name out there. Like we had the podcast, shirts on and all that stuff, like to promote it from that side as well. So everyone there was really cool. But that was the biggest thing. That would be the only negative, was like trying to network in like the first half of the day. But then like once the race starts, like you're paying close attention to it, but I'm still watching almost through my analytical fan eyes, just like I would at home. Like I'm still trying to break down the race and understand the moves. I just have a better seat, like in the
Yeah,
press box beats my couch every time. So
absolutely.
that was the biggest thing.
Nice. Well, look, man, more power to you. I hope that thing gets going. And then I definitely want to, like, when we end this, we'll make sure that we roll the red carpet and just make sure you can let people know what you got going on, because I think that that's a niche. I don't want to call it a niche. That feels disrespectful. That's a avenue of sports that a lot of people don't know. And I feel like, because like you said, it's not one of the big four. It's not basketball, football, baseball, or hockey. Um, Nor is it soccer. But I feel like when you talk about all these elements that there are with it, and like, yeah, I can go rent the headphone. That's nuts. Just like imagine when
Yeah,
the Lakers call a timeout and you can go put in and you can hear what they're saying in the huddle for at the game or whatever. That
yeah,
is nuts. But I think it's just something that, just like, with lack of, it doesn't get a whole lot of coverage. It's not on a lot of TV. It's not on the primetime stuff. So having more, once people get more information, basically, it'll develop more of an audience. So that's actually really cool. You mentioned college, and this is how I'm gonna transition to the next piece. You mentioned college, and we were talking about um you're hating to network and whatnot. Um, Speaking of college, which it's been for me, what year is it? 2024. So it's been 8 years since I've been to college. It's probably been like six since I've even stepped on a college. Nah, I lied. I went to a couple ECU football games, but like stepped on a college campus for any legitimate purpose. It's been a minute, and the football stadium's kind of like off campus, but that's
yeah,
not the
yeah.
point. But right now, the biggest thing that's going on is the NCAA tournament, men's and women's. Um, One is a little more interesting than the other, but they are both going on, and DraftKings and like all the gambling is now legal in North Carolina as of a few weeks ago. So of course, like, things are really, really picking up. There's a lot of steam. And then of course, NC State, local NC State, Raleigh native NC State, men's and women's are both in the final four. There's a lot to unpack, because we can
Hmm.
get to the important stuff. But naturally, the conversation everybody's having, specifically about the women's game, is the stars, and how there are finally stars. And like what the NBA has done, and where I actually think they've made a mistake, is NBA is star driven. There's always a face of the league. There's always a few. LeBron, Steph, Kevin Durant have basically been carrying the league, that title of faces of the league, for the last 15 years, like all of them. Obviously, Steph was really the last 10, but the last 15 years, those three. And the problem is, because they have been so marketable, that now they're all on their last legs, and the NBA hasn't found that next person.
Right.
Where women's college basketball is changing is that the stars are made in college, so that when it can then partner and help the WNBA. So like the last star we had in college as far as men is concerned is probably who, Zion, right? Like
Yeah.
a lot of these names come in the NCAA tournament, like Ja, like Steph, when they go crazy. And then, but like Kevin Durant 1 year at Texas, but like the stars, like the last one really was Zion. And that's because we knew him while he was in high school, because of the videos of him dunking like crazy at 14 years old.
Right.
But
Right.
college basketball doesn't produce stars. You already have all the transferring, so you can't even fall in love with a specific team, because every year that team is different. It's not like, and I'm a North Carolina Tar Heel fan, and it's not like me watching 2005 they win a championship. 2006 they got four new starters, and they don't win another championship until 2009. but those 4 new starters from 2006 are now champions in 2009, and they grew and they developed, and it was the same guys. It happened again in 2016. They lost in the championship game. They had a couple seniors, but all those guys, you got top 10 recruits who are staying 3-4 years, and they win in 2017. You don't get that now. You got the old system, which was, Kentucky, they go get all the freshmen.
Right.
We're gonna get some high recruited players, maybe one that leaves early. A lot of them are gonna stay, and you can actually love the team and love the coach and just like be invested. You can't invest in a guy who either A is gonna go pro after this year or is gonna transfer because he didn't play a lot this year. And in the women's game, one, they already have to stay 3 years. Two, there's not a whole bunch of transferring like that.
Yeah.
And they have stars.
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's kind of one of those live by the sword, die by the sword, right? Like, if you are a Kentucky, you love getting these great players in, right? And like you kind of are willing to roll those dice because you're hoping it'll pay off on the court in the short term. But I think if you're looking at the health of the league, of the sport in terms of men's college basketball, like yes, like the one and done rule definitely hurts them to a huge level. Like you mentioned, like it's hard for you to get invested. Like you're getting whiplash, it seems like every year. If you have a whole different team, people want to see those players be there over the long term. And I really do think the NFL is in a healthier place because people in the NFL, they may like their players, but they love their teams, right? Like people don't say, I was an Aaron Rodgers fan. They say, I'm a Green Bay Packer fan, right?
Yep.
And they were a Packer fan before Aaron came along, and they'll be a Packer fan long after Aaron's retired, right? And if I'm the Packers, like I'm gonna get a lot more money from you as a consumer, and that's not a bad thing. That's just the nature of sports, right? It's a consumption based thing, but I'm gonna get the money from you for a lifetime. If you're a Packers fan, like you grow up in a Packers onesie, and you might, go in a Packers casket if you play your cards right, like that. Like that's the way it is. But I kind of went through that just a touch when when my GOAT Tom Brady left the Patriots, right? Like you kind of have to have for me at least, I had to have a moment of reflection. Like, are you a Patriots fan? Or are you a Tom Brady fan? Right? Like there's a touch of soul searching in that moment to try to figure out like, what do you do? And so like, that's for a guy who's been there 20 years, but imagine a guy who might be great. He's there for 3 years and he's gone, right? Like as much as I might love that player, like I'm not going to have that same level of attachment. So, I'm thrilled to see the women's game blow up like it has been. It seems in the last, let's say 2 years, it's really, really accelerated this year. I was fortunate. One of my close friends has season tickets. He's had season tickets for probably 3 or 4 years now to the NC State women's games. And so we go to he'll take me at least to 3 or 4 games a year, and we'll go there. And I had a great time. This is again, like going back 3 to 4 years. It's a quality game. Like if you like sports, like if you like athletic competition, like it checks all those boxes. Like you'll get the comments from certain corners of social media that are all just really based in sexism. Let's be honest, like about the game, and they try to say like, because they can't dunk and like all this garbage like that, like all that crap. But like, if you want to see a good athletic product, there's no reason to not watch these athletes play. I'm not even going to say these women, I'm going to say these athletes play. So I'm thrilled for them. I think the fact that they're getting, these household names, like if you can get to a place where someone walking on the street can name you 5 WNBA players, like you've really moved the needle. Because we can be honest and say that if you want a diehard WNBA fan, you probably couldn't name 5 teams, unfortunately. And that's just the state of where the league was and currently is. And that can go into a whole nother conversation about marketing and the amount of attention it gets both on TV and the media. But, I'm hoping that as these college superstars do get to the pros, they can keep that air of importance with them and go to these teams and help elevate them. And it's kind of unfair, really, to ask, let's say 3 women to, hey, make my league important, please. Here's my whole sports league. Make it important for me. Like, it's really not a fair ask, but unfortunately, like if you're going to be a trailblazer in that regard, like that's kind of just, the cross you have to bear, unfortunately. But for them, all they have to do is just keep balling out. Like, you don't have to be the second Maya Moore or anybody, just be the first Caitlin Clark and just ball out. And like, if you can do in the pros, which I imagine they'll be able to, like, based off the games that I've watched, like, I'm not sitting there thinking, Cameron Brink can't play in the WNBA. Like, I'm not thinking that. I'm thinking, all right, she's gonna go there and be a great player. Like, you just have to do that and do your job, and like I said, continue to carry yourself like you did in college. So I'm very interested to see how that happens because at least in my lifetime, I can't think of a sport league that has gone through the rapid development like this case with college basketball. Like I was there for the NASCAR bubble in like the late 90s into the early 2000s, but that was the roller coaster chunking up before the fall off. This is like a forest fire, right? Like it just blew up really quickly. So I think from a sports history perspective, I'm really curious to see what happens with it. I want it to do well. I want the league to do well. Um, I think the more sports you have out there, the better. I think representation is really important. Making sure that the 5 and 6 year olds that see these women play say this is a route for me. That's important. That matters. And like you don't have to be a woman to want representation for these women. I think that's something that any decent person can see and say like, hey, this is something that's good for sports. Like I want this to do well. Now, I'm not saying I'm expecting every basketball fan to have to go and get WNBA season tickets, but you can support, at least don't hold them back, right? Like
Right.
you ain't gotta
Yeah.
push me up, but don't hold me back, right?
Yeah.
And I'm seeing, at least in my circle on the internet, which credit is a very small ripple in the ocean, but I've seen a lot more positive than negative, and I'm really happy for that. I'm very interested in seeing how these next couple days go. Like I mentioned, I've been following this women's NC State team for a while. We got a lot of really good players, and my one dream from college sports perspective is I just want one national championship in my lifetime, right? Like I just need one. And I remember when I was in college, it was a little bit longer than you, not a lot longer, but a little bit longer. And we had the men's team had a Sweet 16 run, and that was great. If any one of your listeners know who Kevin Wood is, like that was our guy. He was that's a deep cut name for for college athletics. If you know who
Yeah.
Kevin Wood is,
Yeah.
yeah, that's a deep cut. Um, but I just wanted one run, and around that time was when Nick Saban, Alabama was super hot, and it seemed like every other year. Like if you were at Alabama for like 5 years at that time, you probably saw 3 championships, right? Like
Right.
you were just
Right.
an embarrassment of riches. And I just remember thinking, if I can just get one. Because you see, like, the older teams, and you see, the clips, and they're all wonderful, but they're kind of grainy. They're not in HD. They're not recent. So like if I could just get one in my lifetime. Now if the greatest entity, the creator of the universe is listening to me right now and gives me a men's and a women's championship, I'm good forever, bro. Like I'm good till the sun blows up after that. Like in the same year, like you couldn't tell me anything. You kidding me? So but I just want one, and I'm just really, really proud of the team. Like I said, both the men's and the women's. I'm more surprised by the men's team success than the women's, to be honest. Just based on what I see now, I fully admit, like I'm not gonna sit on here and pretend like I watched every single game of every single basketball team. But like from the games that I did watch, I was like, okay, the men's state team is probably not long for the tournament, right? Like, and we saw what happened with the ACC tournament. Like, they had to shock the world just to get a bid. And I mean, but to their credit, they did it, right? Like, if you've done the impossible, like you can't take that away. So, I'm really proud of the effort they've done. Like the coaching, the staff, DJ Burns is a star, like an absolute star. I love watching his game. I love his attitude, his energy off the court as well. But man, if we could just get this one, boy, I tell you what, like I said, I'm good. I'm
I'm gonna
good.
I'm gonna go ahead and let you know to maybe temper your hopes just a little bit, because South Carolina is a pretty tall task for these girls. Even though I think that NC State continues to be I thought that them not being ranked to start the season was like the ultimate sign of disrespect. They always end up somehow being in the Final Four, at least the Elite Eight every year. I just don't know why they don't just get that get some of that respect cachet. I know they lose some people, but they got anyway, that's neither here nor there. You talked about kind of the types of fans, and I do think that they're not really fans. It's the people who all they want to do because they're women and they're not men already. Boom, right there. Just wanna shit on it, right? Then you
Yeah.
got the fan who actually do want to come out here and see the Kyrie Irving, see the alley oops. This is what I call the social media fan. So the fan who wants to come, like who doesn't need to watch a game of actual basketball, just needs to see the highlights, and they'll be perfectly fine. This is where the Sports Center top 10 was geared to that fan, right?
Yep.
But they're not real fans of basketball. When you have people who are fans of basketball, that's when all because the women's game actually, in my opinion, is a little bit more technical. It's less about
Yes.
one-on-one. It's more
Yeah.
about footwork. It's more about positioning. It's more about ball movement. It's more
It's more of
about
a
the
team
CC run.
game.
It absolutely. It is fast paced. They can all shoot. I think it's quite frankly, when it comes to them versus the men's game, I think it's better basketball, truthfully. So for people who like the sport of basketball, they're enjoying it. Then, of course, you add on the fact that there's Caitlin Clark, who is a Steph Curry esque figure. Maya Moore was great. Maya Moore was, in my opinion, I'm going to give her because she's the greatest basketball player I had ever seen up to that point.
Right.
Um, Diana Taurasi was my favorite basketball player in college. She was great. They weren't shooting. They weren't doing the thing that all of us at this day and age want to do, which is shoot threes from 40 feet, right? And you
Yeah.
got Caitlin Clark who came in right as Steph Curry is exiting, right, the NBA, and she's shooting these threes. And it's that draft class. It's the 2020. Like we can point to Caitlin Clark, but it's the Paige Beckers, and she 2 years ago was someone who I was paying attention to when she won National Player of the Year as a freshman.
Right.
She was one I was paying attention to. Angel Reese, of course. And then the ratings with the Iowa LSU, which some of those ratings, some of those viewers watching was also rooted in a little bit of racism. But it's
Yeah.
okay. Because regardless, the stars, and then on top of that, the women's game is set up where the stars do shine. Rarely do you don't have a game where LeBron scores 8 points in game 4 against the Dallas Mavericks in the NBA Finals. Like you don't have that. Caitlin Clark shows out, Angel Reese shows out, Paige Becker shows out, like they all show out every time. So you know that okay, if I tune in to watch this game, nobody's sitting for because they want load management, and
Right.
they're all gonna play pretty well, and those girls are all well-rounded. They're not just a shooter or just a rebounder or just a shot blocker, or like they do all types of stuff, which in turn makes the game as a whole better because the best players do a lot. Um, so I think what also helps is this NIL. I don't know if um people realize because now with this NIL, and so now you see Caitlin Clark in commercials, right? So like
Mhm.
you don't have to only see her if you're watching women's basketball to see her. And someone's gonna say, Yo, who is that? Right? Someone's
Right.
gonna and then they see these, and like you see Caitlin Clark all over the place. But couldn't do that 5 years ago. So 5 years ago, you weren't going to see Caitlin Clark unless you turned on Iowa women's basketball. And let's be honest,
You had to
who
be
was
in the
thinking
trenches.
anything about Iowa women's basketball 5 years ago? You hear,
Right.
oh, UConn won another championship. It got to the point where it was like, oh, they four-peated. Okay, like we just knew that was a part of the news cycle. UConn wins again, but it wasn't, whatever. You got now, and we don't even live in Iowa. I can't imagine what the local stuff is when it comes to
Right.
Caitlin Clark. But so that NIL stuff is allowing this, like you talked about, this forest fire to just like fly up in flames because you're going from there's a little bit of popularity. Remember, they even like 2020 guy like NBA players were trying to pop up the WNBA games with the
Yeah,
orange,
I remember
the
I think
orange.
Kobe was the first player I remember seeing go into WNBA games.
Yep, yep.
Remember
Devin
that?
Booker
Yeah.
showed up in his and I've actually got that WNBA hoodie. Mine's a little too big. They run big. Just if anybody who's gonna order one, they run big. Probably should get a size lower than you expect. But yeah, it was a whole thing that clearly the men were trying to shed some light. And little did we know, all it took was some NIL and one recruiting class. And now everyone's locked in. I mean, it broke records. 12.3 million. Iowa LSU. Followed up with a great game with USC and UConn. Juju Watkins, who's a freshman. She's gonna be here for 2 more years at least. We got her. It's a good time, man, for women's college basketball. But my fear is that if the WNBA doesn't take this seriously, there's going to be like I don't want another ABA situation. And if you're not
Yeah.
familiar, I don't know all of the ins and outs, but the basic premise is the ABA saw that the NBA maybe couldn't pay some players, wasn't as popular. This is back in like the 70s, 80s, something like that. So they created another league, the ABA. So,
Right.
when you
Yep.
hear people say things like since the merger, that's what we're talking about because the ABA said, well, we'll pay you. And then good players. So when you hear, oh, the WNBA, the first pick in the draft, Aaliyah Boston, she makes less money per year than I do
Right.
for her rookie contract. Less money. This is why the Brittany Grinders go overseas to play in Russia because they'll actually make
They'll get money.
millions of
They'll get
dollars
paid. Yeah.
in the off season versus being over here and it's like they work a 9 to 5, flying commercial. Like so, but if you don't start to take this seriously, it only takes one person who's got a lot of money to say, maybe I want to make another live golf situation and
Yeah.
grab girls to come play over here because they're going to get paid more. And all you need is 3 of the stars and just good basketball. And the next thing you know, the WNBA is tripping. So the WNBA and the NBA need to partner together and figure out how to get this before an ABA situation happens again. Because if they get in like that, get in the weeds that way, it could be a problem.
Yeah, I mean, I think it really is gonna come down to TV. Like, I think it all comes down to TV exposure, you know? How many times have you seen a WNBA game on ESPN, on TNT, NBC, ABC, CBS? Like, not very often, right? Like, in your lifetime. I'm sure you could probably count them on your fingers. So, if I'm the WNBA and the NBA, I'm going to these channels and these networks, and I'm saying, "Look, you gotta put us on." Like, I don't care if it's just every Wednesday night, like Wednesday, Thursday, like during a dead, air quotes, dead time of the week, but we gotta get TV time because that's the only way you're gonna get people to care. If they're on TNT and like Shaq and Kenny are talking about them, people are gonna care, people are gonna listen. But if they're, no, on ESPN 8, like, no one cares about that, right? So and social media can only carry you so far. So yeah, I think that's really in my opinion, that's what it's gonna come down to. And I'm hoping that, like you said, like they take it seriously. I feel like they have to though, because there was already, some small chatter. I remember not that long ago about the WNBA getting folded, right? Because we were like, it's not making money, it's not really worth it. Like, and again, a lot of that is language may have been coded with a sexism against women's basketball, which is a real thing. It exists. Like, I'm not gonna sit and pretend like it doesn't exist. I see it on the timeline all the time. But I think those fears have to be taken seriously. And I mean, realistically, if you're a sports league that's struggling, this is kind of your best case scenario, right? Like, you really couldn't ask for more than this to get multiple star level players joining your league that are young, they're talented, they're going to be around for a long time in your best case scenario. So you have to strike now because you may not get another shot at this, And I'm not trying to be dramatic and be like Caitlin Clark has to save the WNBA or anything, but like, yeah, if they go off and if they're playing in Italy in 2 years, when's the next one gonna come? They may never come, right? Like, there's no guarantee for that. And I mean, never mind the fact that she's a special talent in her own right from an athletic game. Like you said, like she's the closest thing I think we've seen to Steph Curry since Steph Curry, right? Like, you think they're gonna come around every year? You think every 5 years, another girl's gonna come
Right.
around like that? Like, you can't, set your watch by that.
Yep.
So I agree with you. I think it's something they have to take very seriously, and I'm really hopeful that they will, because I do want that league to grow. And if you're a fan of sports, you love the story, right? Like, at the end of the day, like, sports is entertainment, and it's all about the stories. if you're the undefeated big bad Patriots against the, underdog Giants, like that's a story. David and Goliath story, like everyone knows that kind of story, or if you're, in NASCAR, one of the greatest drivers ever, Dale Earnhardt, spent 20 years trying to win the biggest race. He's won everything else in the sport, 7 championships, could never win the biggest race of the year. On his 20th try, he got it. Like that's a story of struggle and coming back to the well and failing and finally succeeding. You can relate to. And like just because it's a women's game doesn't mean those stories aren't there. And like that's to me is what's most interesting about sports in general. It's just that kind of struggle. So if you like that part of sports, if you care about the athleticism combined with the emotions of it, well, this is more of what you like. Like if you really just want dunks, I mean, slam ball existed back in the day with the trampolines. Like, if we want to be honest, like you could go make that league and they dunk all day long, but are we gonna say that's the purest, most honorable version of the sport of basketball? Probably not, right? So I just think if you love sports, I'm not saying you're obligated to like women's game, of course you're not, but it has all the makings of the things that to me a sports fan would like. And that's one reason why I'm so passionate about it being successful, because I think it's exactly what you would want more of. No one's sitting around saying, "Oh man, I've had enough good sports."
Right.
No one's, no
Right.
one, who's ever said that. Like I want more stories. I want more athletes and teams and coaches that I care about. I want rivalries, but that can only grow if it's on my TV.
Yeah.
It can't grow on my timeline necessarily. It can start on my timeline, but I can't only be exposed to it through, a 60-second clip, or a TikTok. Like they can only get you so far. So I agree. I hope it goes well. Like I would love to see, them be a bit more creative in terms of like the marketing of the sport. I just feel like if I had a whole sports league to market, like this, but I'm sure the listeners don't, but like that's my background was marketing. Like that's my profession. If I had a whole sports league to market, do you know how creative we could get? Like you have so many levers you could pull from.
Yeah.
And there's so many different things you could do in terms of being creative. Yes, on social, but you could have, I'd have billboards in every major city with these people on them, like there's just so much. Like I would have Caitlin Clark on every freaking bus in the city that she got drafted on, like every single one. There's just so much you can do. And I feel like they probably have rested on their laurels and kind of just figured, well, this is what we are as a league, and we're content to that. And that may have affected them, and that may have been what caused them to wither. This is pure speculation now, but this should be the thing that lights the fire under you as leadership, as team owners, as executives to say, hey, if nothing else, we can make a boatload of money. And if
Yep.
anything should motivate you, it's making a boatload. Like, go ask the people that got those TV ratings how much they care about the women's game right now. Ask them about those ads that they've got paid for. They care about the women's game a lot. So if you want to make some money, you should
Yeah.
probably take this seriously. If nothing else, never mind, the moral, the fan side of it. If nothing else for your bottom, because I know if nothing else, your bottom line exists. Do it for the
Right.
money,
Yeah. That's it'll be interesting because like you mentioned, they gotta add TV time. I think TV deals are a huge deal. And that's NFL makes a lot of money off of TV deals. And like you
Mhm.
said, look, like it's also difficult because the WNBA and the NBA take place at 2 different times. So like it's
Yeah.
hard to get that team. Like if the WNBA, because the season's a little shorter, if the WNBA playoffs and the NBA playoffs happened at the same time, but in alternating kind of ways, the way that the tournaments do, college basketball tournaments, you might be able to do something. You talked about a lot of money. We're gonna go ahead and transition one last time before I get you out of here because I mentioned DraftKings earlier and all the gambling in North Carolina. And I don't know what's up with your boy Shohei Otani, man. Part of me feels like his interpreter, and I'm gonna put that in air quotes because I don't know what the hell's going on over there. He might be in the Homeboy Hall of Fame,
Mhm.
which I heard a different sports personality say. I will not coin that. That was not me. But Homeboy Hall of Fame sounds good. It sounds to me like there was some stuff. Forgive me for not being an A+ reporter, but it came out that $4.5 million came from Shohei's account to pay off a bookie. Then it came out, nope, it was stolen. Then it came out, nope, My interpreter took it, and we don't know what's going on exactly. Sounds to me like either I was gambling and my homeboy said, "I'll take the fall because you're good. I'll go sit up in jail for a little while," or his interpreter was just stealing. And when you sign a $700 million deal, I guess 4.5 can go missing every so often. I don't know. I don't know. He probably doesn't look at his accounts at all. And it's easy if you're someone's interpreter and you're the only person who speaks the language English and Japanese. So they every single bit of communication they solely rely on you for. I can see how you can get got if that's what happened.
Right. Who was it? Was it Chris Carter that said, "Make sure you got a fall guy"?
Make sure you got a
I,
fall guy.
I now look. I'm gonna say, is it possible that his interpreter stole the money? Yes. I'm not gonna pretend like it's impossible, but if I'm the interpreter for the richest baseball player in the world, why am I gonna fuck that up? Because I'm gonna get a lot of money from that guy. I'm gonna get a
Yep.
lot of money for a long time from that guy, right? Like he ain't no 50-year-old player out here hobbling. Like he's entering his prime. He's not even there yet, if we want to be honest. Um, so I'm not gonna pretend like it's not possible. I think this is strata just in speculation. I feel like my man was just bored and was like, yeah, I'll bet some money. And it probably just kind of got out of hand over time, or he probably just forgot to pay it, or maybe there's miscommunication. Maybe I don't know anything about Japanese culture when it comes to this sort of thing, but maybe sports gambling isn't frowned upon by athletes over there. I have zero idea. And so maybe culturally he just thought, oh, it's not a big deal. But he doesn't know about Pete Rose, which is fine. Like, hey, if I'm a superstar Japanese baseball player, I probably don't give a crap about Pete Rose either. Like I'm too busy making whatever it is, like 750 million, whatever the number is. I think personally that the man was just spending it. And, the fact that the story changed so quickly to, oh, it was stolen. Oh, no, it was this guy. Because I feel like I go back to the idea of like, if I'm a kid and I get in trouble, my first story is like the frantic story.
Yes.
The lamp fell.
Yes.
Oh, no, the dog did it. The dog, whatever. Oh, well, the dog was in the backyard. Oh, the window was open. The wind blew it down or whatever. It's like, no. True story is probably that whatever's the most plausible story
playing
is
ball
more
in the
than
house.
likely. Yeah, exactly. Like you're playing that ball in the house, like, and now you got to get your ass beat because you broke my lamp, right? Like, and I'm not saying that from any personal experience at all. Love your mom. But I honestly, to me, it's not that big a deal personally. Like, I really don't care if athletes are gambling on other sports or teams that they're not either playing for or playing against. That's my own personal red line. If I'm on the Angels and the Yankees and Rays are playing, and I bet on Aaron Judge to hit a home run, that doesn't affect my effort,
Anything
my
at all.
team's performance. But if I'm betting against the teams I'm playing against or the team that I'm playing for, then I got a big problem with it, right? Because that is a very messy road that baseball has gone down a long time before. The White Sox scandal in like 1909 or whatever it is, like Pete Rose was not the only one. He was just the most famous one that got caught. Like, let's be honest. It's never just one player doing it, whatever it is.
Right.
Whether it's gambling, whether it's steroids, whether it's, drunk driving, whatever. It's never just one. It's the one that got caught or the most famous one that got caught. So it's weird. And, I think it just goes to how prevalent sports gambling has become in the last 3 years, maybe not even 3 years. I feel like in the last like 24 months, 2 years. And I'm of the mindset, it's your money, do whatever you want with it. Right? Like if you want to gamble, and that not just for the players, but for the fans too. But it's just become so prevalent and so overt in your face. And that's what I have an issue with. Like, I don't want an 8-year-old to get 22 DraftKings ads in half a basketball game. Like, to me, because I feel like, one, there's already enough when it comes to like the alcohol, right? And again, like if you want to drink, as long as you're doing it responsibly, I don't care. It's your body. Do what you want with it. I have zero judgment if you say, I want to go to a game, have a beer, or I want to go to the bar, have a beer. But adults aren't the only ones that watch sports. And
Yep.
I'm not saying you can't have a Coors Light commercial, but if I'm seeing Coors Light commercials every single commercial break, that to me is a problem. And I don't have the answer to how you regulate that, but there has to be like a tipping point to where it's like, okay, we can't have 50% of our advertisements be alcohol and the other 50% be gambling. Like these are not, these are called vices for a reason.
Yeah.
And I totally understand the money is so prevalent out there, right? Like DraftKings come to you, and I'm gonna be a hypocrite here because like if you look at my Instagram, I have a DraftKings hat on that's a Bubba Wallace hat. So like I really sound like a hypocrite right now because they sponsor him, but I'm gonna put it out there early. But we have to like push back at some point in
Yep.
terms of how much we allow this to be in our society. And like I don't want to sound like the Puritan who's like, oh, we shouldn't have any of this. Like I'm totally fine with you doing what you want with your own money, your own body, whatever, as long as you do it responsibly, of course. But the idea that like I turn on the TV, like ESPN, they have hour-long shows that are just on gambling, not on like fantasy football. That when I was growing up, that was the big thing like that came out. It was like fantasy football really blew up. Like it existed before, but it blew up. And they would have shows that were just about fantasy football. I was like, this is stupid. Like, why do I care about this? It wasn't until I got
Yep.
older. But now you've got shows that are just based around what are the odds? What's the line? And I don't know how I feel about it. Like to me, it's to a level where I'm uncomfortable with it. And that was before you hear about these players coming out. Uh, you know, Again, like we know this is happening. We've seen several football players get busted for it. Um, and I don't know what the line is, but to me, it would be your bet as long as you're not betting against, your own team or the teams you're competing against. But
Yeah.
a lot of the leagues don't do it.
It's most of the leagues, the rule is you you can't bet on the sport. So like football players, you can't bet on football, but you can bet on whatever else, and you can't bet in the facility. Something
Right.
like that. Like I think that's what most of them, that's their rule. You bring up an interesting point because the other thing that makes this gambling so crazy, the difference between when you see a DraftKings ad and when you see a Coors Light ad, if I want to go get a beer, I gotta go get a beer. We all have our phones in front of us. You gotta be however old to get on DraftKings, but DraftKings didn't ID me, right? It's
No.
not like, and so you're gonna have these kids in college who are like, "Oh, my points, rebounds, assists, player prop is 24. Hey, homeboy, go ahead and bet the under because all I gotta do is tell coach I'm not feeling too good." Hint, hint, Jonte Porter. That
Mhm.
happened twice. And the first time it was crazy, but all of a sudden you notice that there's two different nights where your under hits because you left the game early, and that was the most money won than any other thing in the sport that night. You start raising red flags. But for a college kid who isn't, because we look at we hear NIL and think all these college players are making all this money. It's it's
Right.
the it's the top of the top. But on top of that, like you get this kid who's like, man, I can make $6,000. That's a lot of money. When I was in college, $6,000 was everything. I could have went I could have went 2 semesters off $6,000 and not had
Yep.
another penny come in. That's all my haircuts, all my parties, food and alcohol, and groceries. I could have done all of that in under $600. As a kid, college kid, 6,000 or 600, $6,000. As a kid, all of that was, I was rich. And you got kids who come from nothing. You got, and people with the ignorant, well, they're getting paid, like, they're getting paid in a scholarship, da, 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 but while they're at school, they don't have that, they're not making that money. Like that they still don't have. And
Right.
it's just so easy to tell uncle, right? Someone with you can't prove any relation, hey, just bet the under tonight because I can do that. And that's where it gets dangerous. Or on top of that, and sure, the the built-in deniability that a podcaster has, that a radio host has, that a TV show has is, oh, well, we can assume that you'll do it responsibly. And we'll say, got a gambling problem? Dial 1-800 blah 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 at the end of every DraftKings ad that everybody has.
Mm-hmm.
And there it is. But the reality of it is, like, yeah, I can go see a Jack Daniels commercial because more than likely, because I can't just go pull up my phone and I'm all of a sudden I'm drunk off Jack Daniels. And it being so available is what kind of makes it so dangerous. So it's definitely it's definitely a slippery slope. And if we're not careful, it could get messy.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously not going away, and I think it's gonna get worse before it gets better. And I don't know what the solution is. Like I said, I really don't want more government intervention in my sports, but I feel like it's gonna come to that at some point, if I'm being, completely honest with you. Um, because it grew so fast that there's just no way you can't sit here and tell me, like you said, none of these players look at that stuff. Like you'll see it every week, 20 different sports personalities like, this is my money line for the night or whatever, or oh, pair this and this. And like, you can't think that these players are living in a vacuum where they don't see any of this. And like you said, if I'm, the right tackle of some college team, and they're like, oh, the over under on sacks is 2.5. I might just whip on that block. Like,
Yeah.
I might just let him get lit up for 3 in the first half and take my winnings and go on home. Like you said, like, you could have those conversations sitting around the cafeteria table, in the dining hall. Say, all right, go ahead and put whatever you got on this. Like, I'll take care of the rest, right? I mean, who can track that? Like, it's not possible. And I don't think it's right to put the responsibility for this kind of regulation on children, because these college athletes, no matter how much money they make, no matter how athletic they are, they're still 17 to 21, 22. They're still children. Like, I understand the whole, like, 18 is adult, whatever, but like, you and I both know, because we're not that removed from that age, mentally, you're still kind of a child, right?
Yeah.
And that's not a knock on anyone, but like, I'm not gonna pretend like I had my maturity and my life figured out at 21, 22. Like, if I had a do-over and I had 30-year-old me brain and 20-year-old me body, like, yeah, a lot of choices would go a lot different, right? But like, all of this responsibility is now on them when they didn't sign up for all that. They signed up to be an athlete, a student athlete, right? Because that's the big thing.
Yep.
They're student athletes. That's what they agreed upon. They weren't, when they were 15 and getting recruited, none of this was a thing, right? Like, it wasn't to this level, to this big. So I don't know if maybe it's banning it from college sports, maybe. I don't know. Like, because then if you're, in the NBA and you're 24, 25, like, that's a horse of a different color. But like, I kind of hate it. It's just kind of gross to me. And I'm not surprised by, like we said, the players that got caught for it. I guarantee you there's dozens of them in all the major sports that are out there doing the same thing, that are just going, woof, that ain't me. Like, they'll take the heat off me for a while. But I hate it. I just feel like this is where the sports and business world gets really slimy and gross to me. And I'm just not a fan of it. And I recognize that there's a lot of money to be made, but let's be honest, most of that money is being made by the leagues and by the gambling companies, and they got enough money. So I ain't gonna be on their side. Like, I can't be on the side of the rich and wealthy in a debate and say, like, I'm supporting their cause, right? Like, don't sit here and tell me, like, oh, I can hit on this, 28 leg parlay and be wealthy for the next, 20 years of my life. Like, I'm not. It's okay. Like, I got friends who gamble and they do, and they, share their stuff. And I'm like, all right, you guys have made some money, but how much have y'all made, like, net overall? Ah, well, maybe like plus 100, 200. I'm like, how much you done spent?
Not the
Oh,
life changer.
like, like 2,000, 3,000. I'm like, well, get those.
Yep.
We could make you this $100 a lot easier. It's called a high yield savings account.
Well, that's the thing too. Like, people basically can see this as it's a lottery ticket on my phone, because I can just bet $5 and win and hope I win 5 million. Have you seen the movie The Gambler with Mark Wahlberg?
No.
So basically, Mark Wahlberg is a teacher. Spoiler alert to anybody who plans on watching it. This is not a new movie, by the way. But Mark Wahlberg's a teacher and he's a gambler. He's got a gambling problem. So every after work, he goes and he plays in these high stakes casinos and he's running a tab up in these casinos and he owes people money. His family's rich, and his mom gives him the money that he then goes and gambles away. And now he owes his uncle money. He owes the people he owed money, all this
Right.
stuff. He's got this kid in his class who's an athlete who's supposed to get drafted. He's in with the wrong people. What are those wrong people got him doing? Hey, don't score X amount of points
Mhm.
because I got you on the under or whatever it is. Or don't let your team win by 13 or something. And so the game comes and it's like he's kicking ass and they're up and the guy's mad. And then they come back. He starts selling. So he put him on the bench. They start coming back, all this stuff. And it's like, that's cool when it's in a movie, but
That's
now
real
it can
life.
become the reality because there are a lot of these kids that come from these areas and they can get taken advantage of for moms, right? And that's where it gets scary. And whew, we we took some time. We didn't even get to talk about your Patriots and you know, yeah, the pool of players. I won't comment on their talent or lack thereof. I will let that be up to the audience's interpretation. But if you have a quarterback that you're cheering for, real quick answer. Do you want Jaden Daniels or do you want Drake May or do you want JJ McCarthy? Because there's a lot of talk that any of those three could be their pick at two or at
Can
three.
I be can I be honest with you?
Of
I don't
course.
like any of them. I don't like any of the
Mm.
3 you named. Imma be real with you.
Do you
I
like Caleb Williams?
I like Caleb,
Okay.
yeah, but
All right. Got you.
of the
Got you.
3 you listed, I don't like any
Yeah.
of those 3. They all
Mm.
have s big strengths, but they have a lot of concerns, and me as an amateur fan, like, I fully admit I don't break down film for a living. When I was in college and high school, I wanted to be an NFL coach, so I really studied film, and I'm not gonna pretend like I know football like that, like coaches level, but I watched a lot of the game, and I'm happy to be wrong, but I just see a lot of flaws in each of their games that really would rear their ugly heads at the next level. Now, that's not saying they can't be coached up, but, it seems like your boy Drake is our most realistic pick at 3. Is he I wish people could see my face, but, like, is he better than Mac Jones? Yes. Is he good enough to get you to the promised land in the future? Right, not now, of course, but in the future? I don't know. A lot of the throws that I see from him, they feel a bit floaty for me,
Mm.
and the NFL is not a floaty league. A floaty in the NFL, that's a pick 6
Floating
going
means
the
pick
other way.
six. That's right.
Yes,
That's right.
and
Um,
so I don't love it. I was praying that we would get one because I Caleb's the only guy that out there that I'm like, I really would want this guy.
yeah.
Um, I really wanted Marvin Harrison Jr., if I'm gonna be honest. Like, I got tweets on my timeline from like September, and I was like, hey bud, you're about to be a Patriot. Like, I can't wait. Now I don't think they're gonna do it, of course. Like, quarterback's the most important position. Like, I understand the logic, but I wish they could somehow trade back up to 4 again and, like, get him. I know it's not possible, but, like, in my dream world, like, that dude's gonna be a star. Like,
Yeah.
he's my outside of Caleb, he's my 2nd, like, favorite overall player that I would love to see on the team.
He's definitely so the thing about the Patriots is like they need talent, right?
Yeah.
So it might even make sense if they didn't feel like any of these quarterbacks, if they felt the way you felt, if any of these quarterbacks could possibly be what they hoped they would be, then they could trade back. But I feel like trading Mac Jones told us that they want to get a specific quarterback and they feel they
Yeah.
can. Otherwise, they could have traded with, like Minnesota, who's got 11 and 23, picked up a couple seconds, and then that way they could start adding pieces because they need talent. The
Yes.
quarterback's not going to solve all the problems, but you know, we'll see how it goes, and we'll be in touch because I'm interested because I don't really want to talk about the lack of offseason my Cowboys have had. So we will just end it there. That is Arthur Freeman. Arthur, tell everybody your podcast, where you can find your podcast, all the good stuff.
Yeah, man. Victory Lane Vibes. You can find us on Twitter, on all the socials at VL Vibes Podcast. And we're on everywhere: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Podcasts. Uh, Check our Twitter. We got the link in the bio. You can find us everywhere. We drop episodes every week. During the regular season, we did a bunch of content in the off season. If you want interviews, we interviewed probably a dozen drivers since the year started. So we got a lot of stuff out there. We did a bunch of cool content for Black History Month, a bunch of cool content for Women's History Month. So yeah, check us out. We're, like I said, come catch a vibe with us. We're the best Black podcast in racing, in my opinion. My very unbiased opinion.
I hear that. Best Black podcast in racing. That is Arthur Freeman, and I am the one and only Kevo. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for listening. Remember, subscribe to the podcast, rate it, review it. If you don't like it, review it anywhere. Anyway, make sure you give it 5 stars. If you don't like it, you can give it 5 stars and just not say nothing. Nobody has to know it was you. You ain't got to be a hater. That's going to do it, though. Thank you again, Arthur. It's been real. It's been fun. It's been real fun. And for everybody listening out there, I appreciate all of y'all. So until next time, we'll see you guys in a couple of days.